The crimson dress clung to Zara's dark skin like a second heartbeat, borrowed courage wrapped in silk. She wasn't supposed to be here, in this glass tower that pierced Seoul's night sky, waiting for a man whose name made politicians whisper and rivals disappear. But desperation doesn't ask permission, and Zara Thompson had run out of choices 3 days ago when her student visa rejection letter arrived. Behind her, expensive shoes whispered against marble. A turn. Min Hyuk stood in the doorway, and the air changed. Not the way it shifts before a storm, but the way it stills before an execution. He was tall for a Korean man, dressed in black that made him look like he'd stepped out of shadows and decided to stay. His face was all sharp angles and cold beauty, the kind that made you forget to breathe. But it was his eyes that trapped her, dark and fathomless, holding secrets that could bury cities. "Miss Thompson." His voice was silk over steel. His English perfect but touched with that Seoul accent that turned every word into something dangerous. "You came. You didn't give me much choice," Zara managed, though her voice shook. "Marry me or get deported. That's not really an offer, Mr. Min. That's extortion." Something flickered in those dark eyes. Amusement, maybe. Or respect. "In my world, they're the same thing." He moved closer, each step deliberate. "I researched you. Graduate student in Korean literature. Full scholarship until your sponsor mysteriously withdrew funding. Visa revoked without explanation. No family to help you, no money to fight it. You have 9 days left in Korea." Her stomach dropped. "How do you know all that?" "I make it my business to know everything." He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark. "I also know you've applied to 17 different programs, contacted immigration lawyers, even tried calling your embassy. Every door closed, every path blocked. Tell me, Miss Thompson, do you believe in coincidence?" The truth hit her like cold water. "Ooh, you did this. You got my funding pulled." "I created a problem," he said calmly, "so I could offer you a solution. Don't look at me like that. I'm not a good man, but I'm an honest one. I needed a wife. You needed to stay in Korea. I simply made sure our needs aligned. You destroyed my life to manipulate me into marrying you." Anger burned through her fear. "What kind of monster are you? The kind who gets what he wants." He pulled out a small black box from his jacket, opened it. A diamond ring caught the light, throwing stars across the walls. "The kind who will give you permanent residency, a generous monthly stipend, a penthouse to live in, and complete freedom to finish your degree. All you have to do is wear my ring, attend events as my wife, and ask no questions about my business. 2 years. Then we divorce quietly, you keep your residency, and I give you enough money to start any life you want. And what do you get? Legitimacy. A beautiful, educated foreign wife makes me look like a respectable international businessman instead of what I actually am." He stepped closer. "Which is something you should never ask about." Zara's hands trembled. Every instinct screamed to run. But where would she go? Back to Lagos. Back to her aunt's cramped apartment where her mother's medical bills were drowning them. Back to a future that felt like suffocation. "Why me?" she whispered. "Really?" Min Hyuk was quiet for a long moment. 3 weeks ago, at the immigration office. Everyone looked away when I walked in. Fear, disgust, shame. But you. His eyes held hers. You looked me straight in the face and smiled like I was just a person. Not a monster. Not a criminal. Just a man. He pulled out a contract, set it on the glass table between them. "I need someone who can do that convincingly in public. Someone who won't cower or cringe when I touch them. Someone who can make the world believe I'm capable of love. Are you?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Something passed across his face too quick to name. "No, but you can make them think I am. That's all that matters." Zara looked at the contract, at the ring, at the man who'd orchestrated her destruction and called it an opportunity. She thought of her research, of the tiny apartment in Hongdae she'd have to leave, of the cherry blossoms she wouldn't see bloom, of her mother's voice on the phone last week saying the treatment was working. "Please don't come home yet, finish your dreams." At 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday night, Zara Thompson signed her name next to Min Hyuk's and became someone she didn't recognize. Before we continue with Zara and Min Hyuk's story, do me a favor. If you love Korean romance stories with that perfect mix of danger and desire, hit that subscribe button for Unfold Korean Stories. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. My sister said I'd never reach 10,000 subscribers. Let's prove her wrong together. Now let's see what happens when fake becomes real. The wedding took place in a villa that seemed to float above the Han River. All traditional Korean architecture meeting modern glass, old Seoul wrapped in new skin. Only 5 people witnessed their vows. Min Hyuk's 3 lieutenants, men who looked like they could kill you 17 different ways without breaking a sweat, an elderly officiant who'd clearly performed ceremonies he'd rather forget, and Zara, standing there in a modern hanbok the color of fresh blood. When she'd first seen the dress that morning, she'd almost cried. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever worn, and she was wearing it to marry a stranger who'd blackmailed her into this moment. The irony tasted like ashes. Min Hyuk stood at the makeshift altar in a black suit that probably cost more than her entire education. His hair was swept back, revealing the aristocratic lines of his face, and when she walked toward him, his eyes tracked her movement like a predator watching prey. But there was something else there too, something that made her breath catch. Hunger. Not the crude kind, but something deeper. Possession laced with something almost like wonder. The ceremony was in Korean, ancient words about duty and union that she only half understood. But she understood the weight when Min Hyuk said, "I do" in English, for her benefit. It sounded less like a vow and more like a promise, or maybe a threat. Then he produced a ring, antique gold, intricately carved. "This belonged to my grandmother," he said loud enough for the witnesses to hear, but his eyes never left Zara's face. "She was the only person who ever looked at me like I was worth something." He slid the ring onto her finger, and the metal was warm, like it had been waiting for her. Then he leaned close, his breath hot against her ear, and whispered words that changed everything. "From this moment, you belong to my world, and I protect what's mine." The kiss that sealed their marriage wasn't what she expected. It was soft, almost questioning. His hand cradling her face like she was something precious instead of purchased. For just a moment, Zara forgot the contract, the manipulation, the performance. For just a moment it felt real. Then he pulled back, and the walls were up again. That night, in the master bedroom of the villa, Zara waited. She'd prepared herself for this, the wedding night, the expectations. She was his wife now, at least on paper. She knew what that meant. The door opened. Min Hyuk entered, already loosening his tie. "Sit," he said, not unkindly, gesturing to the low table by the window. Confused, she obeyed. He disappeared into another room, returned with a tea service. The scent of jasmine filled the air as he poured with practiced precision. "Drink." She took the cup with shaking hands. "I don't understand. I know what you expected." He poured his own cup but didn't drink, his dark eyes studying her face. "But I won't touch you. Not tonight. Not any night until you want me to." The relief was so intense she almost dropped the cup. "The contract says you'll be my wife in public," he continued. "It says nothing about private. What happens here?" He gestured to the space between them. "That's not something I'll take. It's something you'll give when you're ready." "Why?" The question came out as barely a whisper. His laugh was bitter. "Don't mistake this for kindness. It's selfishness. I've taken many things in my life, Miss Thompson. Land, money, power, lives." His eyes went darker somehow. "But I won't take this. Not from you." He stood, set down his cup. "At the immigration office when I first saw you, I told you I'd give you all 13 inches. Do you remember?" Heat flooded her face. She'd been too terrified to process it then, but now the words echoed in her mind, and she couldn't meet his eyes. "I wasn't talking about what you think," he said, that ghost of a smile touching his lips. "When you understand what I meant, you'll come to me on your own. Not because of a contract, not because you're afraid or desperate, but because you choose to." He walked to the door that connected to another room, paused at the threshold. "Sleep well, Mrs. Min, tomorrow. The real performance begins." Then he was gone, leaving her alone with jasmine tea and a mystery that burned hotter than any touch. Life in Min Hyuk's penthouse was like living inside a diamond, beautiful, cold, and cutting. The apartment occupied 3 floors of a Gangnam skyscraper, all black marble and chrome, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a 360 view of Seoul sprawling below like a circuit board of ambition. Zara quickly learned the rhythms. Mornings, Min Hyuk would disappear into his study or leave entirely, flanked by his lieutenants. Sometimes he'd return smelling of cigarette smoke and something metallic she didn't want to identify. Afternoons, men in expensive suits would arrive for closed-door meetings where voices occasionally rose to dangerous volumes. Evenings, sometimes he'd sit across from her at dinner, silent and distant. Other times, his chair stayed empty until dawn. She was a ghost in a glass cage. The only constant was Jay, the youngest lieutenant, who served as her shadow. Polite but distant, always 3 steps behind. "Can I go outside?" she asked him on day 5. "Not alone. Can I visit the library?" "Which one?" "I'll drive you." "Can I breathe without permission?" He almost smiled at that. That one's still allowed. The breaking point came during a business dinner on day 7. 12 men around a table laden with enough food to feed a village, discussing deals in rapid Korean. Zara sat beside Min Hyuk in a navy silk dress, hands folded, performing her role. Invisible, until senior associate Kim had too much soju. "Min Sajangnam," Kim slurred, gesturing at Zara with his glass. "Your foreign wife is very decorative. Does she speak, or is she just for looking at?" The room went silent. Min Hyuk's expression didn't change. "Careful, Kim." "I'm just saying," Kim laughed. "What good is a pretty pet if she can't even understand proper business?" "My understanding," Zara interrupted, her voice cutting clear across the table, "is that you're about to make a fool of yourself. But please continue." "I'm fluent in Korean, and I'd hate to miss the show." Shock silence. Kim's face flushed red. "You dare." "I dare to correct you in 2 languages," she continued in flawless Korean, the formal cutting dialect reserved for putting someone in their place. "If you'd prefer, but I imagine you're already struggling with one." Someone choked on their drink. Another man coughed to hide a laugh. Min Hyuk didn't move, didn't speak, but she felt his attention lock onto her like a laser. Kim stood abruptly. "Min Sajangnam, your wife needs to learn respect." "Associate Kim." Min Hyuk's voice dropped to a register that made the temperature plummet. "I believe you're leaving." It wasn't a suggestion. After Kim left and the dinner continued, Zara could feel Min Hyuk's eyes on her for the rest of the night, burning into her like a brand. At 2 a.m., she was in the library when he found her. "My study. Now." She followed him through the darkened penthouse. His study was all leather and dark wood. The one room that felt lived in. Weapons lined one wall in a glass case. Knives, swords, things she didn't have names for. He closed the door, locked it. "What you did tonight?" He turned to face her, and she couldn't read his expression. Was either very brave or very stupid. "He disrespected both of us." "I can handle disrespect." "That's not the point." He took a step closer. "The point is you made yourself visible. You drew attention. In my world, attention is dangerous. Then maybe you should have married someone content to be invisible." Her chin lifted. "But you didn't. You chose me. I chose someone who would play a role. And I am. But I'm not a doll. I'm not decoration." She held her ground even as he closed the distance between them. "If I'm going to survive your world, I need to defend myself. Even if that means using words as weapons." He stopped inches away. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the heat radiating from his body. "You have no idea the danger you're playing with." Something reckless ignited in her chest. Maybe it was 7 days of suffocation. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the way he was looking at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Then teach me," she whispered. The words hung between them like a lit match over gasoline. For a long moment he just stared. Then slowly Min Hyuk smiled. Not polite, not restrained. Real. Dangerous and delighted and devastating. "You're not afraid of me." "I'm terrified of you," she admitted. But I'm more afraid of disappearing. His hand came up, fingers tracing her jawline with devastating gentleness. The touch sent electricity racing down her spine, made her breath catch. Everyone in my life either fears me or uses me, he murmured. But you look at me like I'm human, even when you're angry, even when you should run. Where would I run to? His thumb brushed across her bottom lip. You're trapped in my world. And tonight I decided to stop being prey. His smile widened, sharp and beautiful. That's the most interesting thing that's happened to me in years. Then he stepped back, leaving her dizzy. Go to bed, Zara. Tomorrow we have a charity gala. Now that you've shown your teeth, everyone will be watching to see if you'll bite again. She moved toward the door, but his voice stopped her. Zara, he turned. He leaned against his desk, arms crossed, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. For what it's worth, what you did tonight, that was the moment you became my wife. Not the contract, not the ceremony. That. The wall between them had cracked, and neither could pretend anymore this was just a transaction. 3 nights later, Zara woke to an empty bed and the sound of rain hammering glass. 3:47 a.m. Min Hyuk's side was cold. He'd been gone for hours. Through the penthouse's glass walls, Seoul glittered below like scattered diamonds. He wasn't in his study, wasn't in the living room. The elevator panel showed the rooftop access light illuminated. She didn't think. Just stepped into the elevator and rode up into the storm. The rooftop was a private garden, trees and planters, stone pathways, a reflection pool rippling under the downpour. And there, on the edge where only a glass barrier stood between him and a 100-story fall, sat Min Hyuk. He was soaked, his white shirt transparent, revealing what she'd never seen before. A massive tattoo covering his chest and shoulders, intricate geometric patterns spiraling outward from his sternum, beautiful and terrible. His hair hung wet across his forehead. An empty whiskey bottle lay beside him. You shouldn't be here, he said without turning. Neither should you. She walked toward him, rain immediately soaking through her nightgown. It's almost 4 in the morning and you're sitting in a storm. Fitting weather. He finally looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. Pain raw and endless. Go back inside. Not without you. He laughed, bitter and broken. Always so stubborn. Don't you know by now? People who stay close to me don't survive. She sat beside him on the cold stone. What happened? Today's date. He stared out at the city. 4 years ago. The day I killed the only woman I ever loved. The confession hung in the rain-soaked air. You didn't. I did. His voice cracked. Her name was Jiyoon. We grew up together. She knew what I was, what I'd become, and she loved me anyway. Stupid, beautiful Jiyoon who thought she could save me from myself. He reached for the empty bottle, let it roll away. I was meeting with a rival syndicate. Negotiations that went bad. She wasn't supposed to be there, but she followed me because she was worried. When the shooting started, she threw herself in front of me. His hand pressed against his chest, fingers digging into the soaked fabric. The bullet was meant for my heart. Perfect shot. Would have killed me instantly. But Jiyoon. He squeezed his eyes shut. I held her while she died. Told her I loved her. Promised I'd follow her. But I didn't. I'm still here and she's been gone 4 years. Zara's throat tightened. After she died, I got this. He unbuttoned his shirt with shaking hands, let it fall open. The tattoo sprawled across his chest, intricate and beautiful. But now she saw what she'd missed. Hidden in the center beneath all the ink was a scar. Small, round, positioned directly over his heart. I took the bullet that killed her, he said, touching the scar with reverent fingers. Had a surgeon embed it in my chest, then covered it with this. A lotus blooming from mud. He gestured to the tattoo. Beautiful things growing from violence. Except it's a lie. Nothing beautiful grows from what I am. The vulnerability was staggering. This man who made politicians whisper and rivals disappear sat before her completely shattered. Zara didn't think. She reached out and placed her hand over the tattoo, over the hidden scar, over his heart. She felt it beating, strong and steady. "Do you know what the lotus means?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "It's the only flower that blooms from mud. It grows in the dirtiest water, pushes through darkness, and still opens toward the light." She met his eyes. "You loved her. You lost her. You carry her with you every day. That's not a lie, Min Hyuk. That's human. I'm a monster. You're a man." Her thumb stroked across the inked petals. "A man who's been through hell and is still here, still breathing. Still capable of more than you think." Something in his expression crumbled. The walls he'd built around himself for 4 years began to crack. "She'd hate who I've become," he whispered. "The things I've done." Maybe Zara didn't lie to him. Or maybe she'd understand you survived the only way you knew how. The rain continued its assault, but neither moved. "I brought you into this world," Min Hyuk said, his voice breaking. "Into my darkness. Told myself it was just business. But tonight, sitting here, all I could think was..." His hand covered hers on his chest. "What happens when the bullet comes for me again and you're standing too close?" "Then I duck," she said simply. He stared at her like she'd spoken a language he'd forgotten. Then impossibly he laughed. Wet and raw but real. "You're insane. I married you, didn't I?" His free hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. Rain streamed down both their faces. "I don't know how to do this. How to care about someone without destroying them. Then we'll figure it out together." She turned her face into his palm. "You don't have to be hollow anymore. You just have to let someone in." For a long moment they sat in the rain, her hand over his heart, his hand cradling her face. Then slowly, Min Hyuk pulled her against his chest. His arms wrapped around her, tentative at first, then tighter like she was the only thing keeping him anchored. She felt his heart hammering against her cheek, felt his breath hitch, felt the moment something inside him finally broke open. "Thank you," he whispered into her wet hair. "For what? For not running. For seeing the mud and staying anyway." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "Flowers bloom from mud, remember? Maybe we both do." After that night everything changed. Min Hyuk didn't disappear at dawn anymore. He'd sit across from her at breakfast, present in a way he hadn't been before. Sometimes his hand would brush hers. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her with an expression between wonder and fear. The walls were still there, but light was getting through. 5 days after the storm, she found herself standing outside his study at midnight. She could see soft glow beneath the door, warm and inviting. She'd been thinking about it since their wedding night. The mystery he'd left her with. 5 words that had haunted her. "I'll give you all 13 inches. She'd assumed God, she'd assumed something crude. But nothing about Min Hyuk was simple. Every word was calculated. So what had he really meant? Her hand lifted. "Look, come in." She pushed open the door and stopped. The study had been transformed. Candles lined the bookshelves, the desk, the windowsill, casting dancing shadows that turned the severe space into something almost sacred. Min Hyuk sat in his leather chair, a glass of whiskey untouched. He still wore his dress shirt from whatever meeting had consumed his evening. He looked exhausted and beautiful and dangerous all at once. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Can you?" A ghost of a smile. "Not for years." Zara closed the door and stepped into the candlelit space. She wore simple silk pajamas, nothing planned. This wasn't performance. This was truth. "I need to know," she said. He set down his glass. "Know what?" "That night. Our wedding. You said you'd give me all 13 inches. What did you mean?" The question hung heavy in the air. Min Hyuk stood slowly, moved around the desk until only feet separated them. "I wondered how long before you'd ask. I'm asking now. Why tonight?" "Because," she struggled for words. "After the rooftop, after you told me about Jiun, I realized I don't actually know you, just pieces. And that phrase has been burning in my mind." He studied her face like he was memorizing it. "What did you think I meant?" Heat flooded her cheeks. "I thought it was something physical. And that terrified you." "Not a question." Yes. But you married me anyway. I didn't have a choice. You always had a choice, Zara. He took a step closer. You could have run, taken your chances with deportation, started over. But you didn't. Because I was desperate. Because you were brave. Another step. And because some part of you wanted to solve the mystery I left you with. He was right. God help her, he was right. So tell me, she whispered. What did you mean? Min Hyuk reached out and took her hand, that electric touch she'd come to recognize. His fingers, rough and warm, laced through hers. Come here. He guided her closer until they stood inches apart. With his free hand, he began unbuttoning his shirt slowly, deliberately, eyes never leaving hers. The fabric parted, revealing the lotus tattoo in candlelight, the petals seeming to move. Then he placed her palm flat against his chest, directly over the hidden scar, over his heart. She felt it immediately. The strong, steady rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Do you feel that? His voice was barely a whisper. Yes. The human heart measures approximately 13 inches when it beats. From the first chamber to the last. From where blood enters to where it's sent back into the world. His eyes held hers with devastating intensity. That night I wasn't talking about anything else. I was warning you, promising you that I would give you all of it. Every beat. Every broken piece. The fierce parts, the protective parts, the parts that scare even me. His free hand came up to cradle her face, impossibly gentle. I'll protect you with my life. That was my first promise. But tonight, my promise is that I'll love you with the same fierceness. Every inch of this heart, he pressed her palm harder against his chest, belongs to you. The good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly. All 13 inches. Forever. The mystery unraveled not into something frightening, but into the most profound confession she could imagine. This man who commanded empires built on fear was offering her the one thing he'd probably never given anyone. His whole, complete, vulnerable heart. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Min Hyuk, she breathed. That was all the invitation he needed. He leaned in and his lips found hers. The kiss wasn't timid. It was acclaiming but also a gift. Fireworks and coming home and the answer to every question she'd been afraid to ask. His mouth moved against hers with hunger and reverence, like she was both treasure and salvation. She kissed him back, her hands sliding up his chest, feeling the tattoo, feeling the heart that beat only for her. When they broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. It's yours, he murmured, voice thick with emotion. It's been yours since you looked at me like I was human. It'll be yours until my last breath. Zara smiled, the first real smile since this whole journey began. Then I'll take it. All 13 inches. And I'll keep it safe forever. Under a blanket of stars visible through the study windows. Their connection sealed. No longer an arrangement. A bond deep and wild and unbreakable. But before Zara could truly understand the man she'd married, before she could navigate his world of shadows, she needed to know how Min Hyuk became Seoul's most feared syndicate boss. The story written in scars beneath his lotus tattoo. The story that would change everything. Jeju Island was supposed to be their sanctuary. The villa perched on black volcanic cliffs overlooking the East China Sea. Isolated and serene. White walls, traditional stone architecture. Gardens filled with camellias and wind-bent pines. Min Hyuk had brought her here for what he called a honeymoon, though they both knew it was about keeping her safe while he dealt with territorial disputes that had turned bloody in Seoul. 3 days, he'd said. His hand on the small of her back as they arrived. Then we go home. That was 2 nights ago. Since then, they'd existed in strange liminal space. Not quite lovers, not quite strangers. He'd shown her waterfalls and lava tubes. They'd eaten fresh seafood in silence on the terrace while the ocean roared below. At night, he'd retreat to his room, but not before his fingers would graze hers in a touch that felt like a question neither was ready to answer. The revelation about the 13 inches hung between them like a drawn breath. Zara had almost worked up the courage to knock on his door tonight. Almost decided she was ready. Almost. Then the first window exploded. Glass shattered inward in a glittering cascade. Zara jerked awake as gunfire erupted. Sharp cracks that split the night. Shouts in Korean. Running footsteps. Her door burst open. Min Hyuk stood framed in the doorway, gun in hand, wearing only dark pants. The lotus tattoo on his bare chest seemed to writhe in shadows. "Get down," he barked. She rolled off the bed as bullets punched through walls. Plaster dust filled the air. The smell of gunpowder burned her throat. Min Hyuk moved to the window, returned fire with cold precision. "Two shots," someone outside screamed. "How many?" That was Jay's voice from the hallway. "At least 8. They came from the water." Min Hyuk's voice was ice. Another lieutenant's response cut off with a grunt and the sound of breaking furniture. Min Hyuk turned to Zara. "Bathroom. Bathtub. Get in and don't move." "What's happening?" "Rival syndicate. They tracked us here." He grabbed her arm, pulled her toward the bathroom. "This is the part where you do exactly what I say." She nodded, throat tight with terror. He pushed her into the marble bathroom, positioned her in the cast-iron tub. "Stay down no matter what you hear." Then he was gone, and she was alone with the sound of war erupting around her. Gunfire. Shouting. The crash of breaking glass. Minutes stretched. Or hours. Time became meaningless. Then silence. Worse than the noise. Footsteps approached. Low. Deliberate. "Mrs. Min." A voice she didn't recognize. Korean accent. Mused. "I know you're in there." Not Min Hyuk. Not Jay. The door opened. A man stepped through, late 30s. Expensive suit now torn and bloodstained. A knife glinting in his hand. "There you are." He smiled. "The foreign bride. Do you know what you're worth? What Min would give to get you back?" Zara's heart hammered. She looked for a weapon. Found nothing. "Everything," the man continued, moving closer. "He'd give everything, which makes you very valuable. And very dead." Min Hyuk appeared behind him like a ghost. Gun pressed to the back of the man's skull. "Drop the knife, Park. Last warning." Park spun instead, impossibly fast. The knife flashed. Min Hyuk dodged, but not far enough. The blade caught him across the chest, slicing through skin and ink. Blood blossomed red across the lotus tattoo. Zara screamed. Min Hyuk's gun fired. Once, Park dropped. Then Min Hyuk stumbled, hand pressing against the wound. Blood poured between his fingers, soaking his pants, dripping onto white marble tile. "No." Zara scrambled out of the tub. "No, no, no. I'm fine." He swayed. "You're bleeding." She caught him as his knees buckled. Her arms barely strong enough to slow his descent. They collapsed together, his back against the tub, her hands immediately pressing against the wound. The cut ran diagonal across his chest, through the center of the lotus. Too deep. Blood pulsed hot and wet against her palms. "Apply pressure," he gasped. "I am." Tears streamed down her face. "Don't you dare die. Don't you dare." "Not planning to." He tried to smile. Failed. His face was going pale. Jay burst into the bathroom, weapon drawn. He saw the blood and cursed. "I'll get the medic." He disappeared. Zara pressed harder, trying to stop the bleeding, feeling Min Hyuk's heart hammering beneath her hands. That 13-inch heart he'd promised her now bleeding out because he'd protected her. "You should have let him take me," she sobbed. "You should have." "Never." His hand covered hers, slick with blood, trembling. "I told you. I protect what's mine." This wasn't protection. This was suicide. This was a promise kept. His eyes found hers, still dark despite the blood loss. "Remember what I said. That I'd give you all 13 inches. Stop talking. Save your strength." "I wasn't lying, Zara." He pressed her hand harder against the wound, and she felt his heart beating frantically beneath torn flesh. "Every beat belongs to you. Worth protecting. Worth bleeding for." The confession broke something in her. All the fear and confusion and careful distance shattered like the villa's windows. This man had just taken a knife for her, had protected her without hesitation, had bled across the heart he'd promised her. "Don't you dare leave me," she whispered fiercely. You don't get to give me your heart and then die. That's not how this works. He smiled then, genuine despite the pain. Not going anywhere. Haven't heard your answer yet. My answer to what? Whether you want it. All 13 inches. The offer still stands. Jay returned with a medic who moved with military precision. He assessed the wound, began packing it with gauze. Min Hyuk hissed but didn't look away from Zara. Need stitches, the medic said. Hospital. No hospitals, Min Hyuk growled. Do it here. As they worked, Zara stayed beside him, her bloody hand gripping his. The villa was chaos, broken glass, bullet holes, bodies being removed. But in the bathroom, with candlelight flickering because the power had been cut, time narrowed to just this. His hand in hers. His blood on her skin. His heart still beating. I'm sorry, he said as the medic began stitching. You deserved better than violence following you even here. Stop apologizing. She squeezed his hand. You saved my life. And you stayed. His eyes held wonder. When you could have run, you stayed. Where else would I go? His thumb stroked across her knuckles. Gentle despite everything. Most people run from me. But you run toward me. Even continue 23:46 when I'm bleeding. Even when my world is falling apart. Why? She looked at the wound across his chest. The lotus now split but still beautiful. The 13 inches beneath still beating. Still fighting to stay alive for her. Because someone has to make sure you keep that promise, she whispered. All 13 inches. I'm not letting you take them back now. Something like joy broke across his pain-twisted face. Is that your answer? Before she could respond, his eyes rolled back. The blood loss finally claiming him. Min Hyuk. She grabbed his face. Stay with me. He'll be fine, the medic assured her. The wound looks worse than it is. Missed everything vital. He'll wake in a few hours. But Zara didn't release his hand. Not when they moved him to the bedroom. Not when Jay tried to get her to rest. Not when dawn broke over Jeju Island, painting the damaged villa in gold and crimson. She stayed because somewhere between the contract and the candlelight and the blood, she'd stopped running from his world and started choosing to be in it. 2 weeks later, they were back at the penthouse. The Jeju villa was being repaired. Park's syndicate had been dealt with. Min Hyuk's wound was healing, though it would leave a scar bisecting the lotus. Another story written in his flesh. Zara found him on the rooftop garden at dusk. Cherry blossoms in full bloom, petals drifting like pink snow. He sat on a stone bench beneath a willow tree, and when he saw her, something in his expression softened. Come here, he said softly. She sat beside him, and he immediately took her hand, that electric touch that still made her pulse spike. I need to tell you something, he said. About Jiyoon. Zara waited, giving him space. I loved her, he continued, his voice steady. She was my first love, my childhood friend. And when she died, I thought I'd never feel anything again. That's why I got the lotus. To remind myself that even in mud, even in darkness, something could grow. He turned to face her fully. But the lotus was a lie. A beautiful picture covering something dead. Until you. His hand came up to cradle her face. You walked into my world and looked at me like I was human. You stayed when I was bleeding. You asked about my heart when you could have kept your distance. Min Hyuk. I love you. The words tumbled out raw and unguarded. I didn't mean to. It was supposed to be a transaction. But somewhere between the contract and Jeju and watching you refuse to leave my side, I fell in love with my fake wife. He pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, Zara. Every stubborn, brilliant, beautiful part of you. And I have no idea what to do except tell you the truth. The garden fell silent except for the gentle drift of petals. Zara's tears fell freely. She reached up and covered his hand with hers. Then let me be your light. Stop reaching for it. I'm already here. His eyes widened. Zara, I love you. Her voice was steady despite the tears. I fought it. Told myself it was survival or temporary insanity. But when you took that knife for me, when I thought I'd lose you, I realized I'd already given you something I didn't know I had. She placed her hand over his heart, over the healing wound. My heart, all of it. Just like you gave me yours. You mean all 13 inches. She smiled through her tears. I want them. Every beat, every broken piece, every dark corner you think is too damaged to love. I want all of it. I want you. For a moment, he just stared at her like she'd spoken a miracle into existence. Then he kissed her. Not the claiming kiss from their wedding. This was everything they'd been holding back. Weeks of tension and fear and longing released in a single moment. His lips met hers with devastating gentleness, like she was something sacred. His hand slid into her hair. Her hands found his chest, feeling the 13 inches beating wildly beneath her palms. The kiss deepened, slow and thorough and certain. He tasted like whiskey and rain and promises finally kept. When they broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. Say it again, he whispered. I love you, Min-hyuk. Every mud-covered, lotus-blooming inch of you. He laughed, the sound bright and disbelieving and full of joy. Then he kissed her again, softer this time. Reverent, we're going to rewrite the contract, he murmured against her lips. No end date. No divorce clause. What are you saying? He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. I'm saying marry me again. For real this time. Not for visas or business or protection. Marry me because you love me. 'Cause I love you. Because we're both broken things that somehow bloom together. Zara smiled, radiant and certain. Yes. Above them, cherry blossoms fell like blessings. Below them, soul glittered with possibility. And between them, two hearts, 13 inches each, beat in perfect synchrony. The lotus had finally bloomed. The light had stayed. And the heart that had once been hollow now beat with fierce, eternal love. 6 months later, Min-hyuk brought Zara back to the seaside villa on Nami Island. No lieutenants, no guards. Just a place where the most dangerous man in Seoul could be simply human. Where he could be hers. She stood on the wooden deck watching the sun sink into the East Sea, wearing one of his white shirts, barefoot, her hair loose. 6 months ago, she would have carefully styled herself. Now she knew he preferred her like this. Unguarded. Real. His arms wrapped around her waist from behind. Come inside. I have something for you. She followed him inside where 13 candles were arranged in a perfect circle on the low table. White tall unlit. Sit, he said gently. She sat, and he sat across from her, producing a lighter. Do you remember? He began lighting the first candle. The night you asked me what I meant. I remember thinking you were insane. He smiled, that genuine smile that still made her heart stutter. Not insane. Terrified. He lit the second candle. I just bound myself to a woman I barely knew. A woman who looked at me like I was human when the rest of the world sees a monster. Third candle. Fourth. I thought I was clever. That I'd hook you with mystery. Fifth. But the truth is, I'd already decided that night. Looking at you in that crimson dress. Seventh. I knew I'd give you everything whether you wanted it or not. Ninth. 10th. You were supposed to be my shield. A wife to legitimize my business. 11th. 12th. Instead, you became my salvation. He lit the 13th candle. The circle was complete, glowing like a crown between them. 13 candles, he said quietly. One for each inch of the heart I gave you that night. Then he stood and began unbuttoning his shirt. She'd seen the lotus hundreds of times, traced its petals in the dark, kissed the scar that split it. But when the candlelight hit his chest, she saw something new. There, in the center of the lotus where the scar crossed, was a new addition. A small anatomical heart, precisely detailed, beautiful in its realism. And beneath it, in elegant script, Zara. Her name etched into his skin forever. When did you? Last week, while you were visiting your mother. He knelt beside her, took her trembling hand and placed it over the tattoo, over her name, over his heart. I wanted you to have it in writing. Permanent. Irrevocable. She felt his heart beating beneath her palm. That 13-inch heart that had kept its promise, that beat for her when she was scared, that bled for her in Jeju, that loved her despite every reason not to. Do you understand now? He asked. What I meant that night. She looked up at him. This dangerous, beautiful, impossible man who'd started as a stranger with a contract and become her home. You gave me all 13 inches, she whispered. Every single one. He pulled her closer until she was in his lap, wrapped in his arms, surrounded by candlelight. The good parts, the dark parts, the parts that remember Jiun, and the parts that are learning to love again. His forehead pressed against hers. I was hollow for so long, just surviving, not living. Then you crashed into my world and demanded I feel again. And God, Zara, it terrified me. Still terrifies me. Because loving you means having something to lose again. Then we're both terrified, she cupped his face. Because losing you would destroy me. But loving you makes me whole. He kissed her, deep and slow and certain. The kind of kiss that spoke of forever, of promises kept, of two broken people who'd found a way to bloom together. When they broke apart, he gathered her closer. Her ear pressed against his chest. She listened to the steady rhythm beneath her name, beneath the lotus, beneath the scars. Thump, thump, thump. 13 inches of muscle and blood and love. All hers. Thank you, he whispered into her hair. For what? For asking the question. For staying when I was bleeding. For loving me despite excellent reasons not to. For being the light I didn't know I was reaching for. Zara smiled against his chest. Thank you for giving me all 13 inches. For making me your wife, your equal, your salvation. Outside, the ocean continued its eternal rhythm. Inside, two hearts beat in perfect synchrony. From contract to devotion. From strangers to soulmates. From hollow to whole. The lotus had bloomed. The light had stayed. And the heart that had once been empty now beat with fierce, eternal love. Stay with me, Min-hyuk whispered. Always, Zara answered, and meant it with every fiber of her being. 13 candles burned between them, a crown of light, a promise fulfilled. A love story written in fire and ink, and the steady beating of two hearts that had found their home in each other. And that, my friends, is how a fake marriage became forever. If Zara and Min-hyuk's story wrecked you emotionally, you're not alone. Drop a comment telling me your favorite part. Hit that like button and subscribe to Unfold Korean Stories if you haven't already. My sister said this story wouldn't get 1,000 likes. Let's prove her absolutely wrong. And here's the best part. I've got another intense romance queued up. Click the next video on your screen to keep the journey going. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Until next time, keep unfolding these stories with me.